The Democratic primary is taking place very quietly. Joe Biden is the presumptive nominee who's going to face Donald Trump in November, and all of this seems to be sliding along on rails. Rather than having a robust primary with multiple candidates battling it out over policy issues and vibes, we are instead having no such thing, non contested, non enthusiastic primary between Joe Biden and his non challengers. However, with no popular replacement for Joe Biden, the status quo Democrat, the Democrats don't really have any other choice than to run him, seeing as how prospective candidates like Pete Buttigieg and Gavin Newsom and even Kamala Harris do not have the name recognition or the popularity that Joe Biden would have in a hypothetical 2024 general election. But if Joe Biden is uncontested and will have zero trouble obtaining the nomination and is therefore presumed the nominee, why are the Democrats not holding a primary? This is something I've been thinking about for weeks, in fact months, ever since the announcement of the Marianne Williamson campaign. Why are the Democrats not having a contest to decide their nominee, if for no other reason than to boost the enthusiasm around Joe Biden, which is actually very, very low right now? He's polling at around 35% approval. And it's only going to continue to get worse if he doesn't course correct on some of his current administrative priorities. The conflict in Gaza right now, which has cost him lots of Arab support. I'm talking about what's going on at the border right now, which is taking the media by storm, and he is more or less capitulating to the conservative narrative about the border. And of course, the economic issues that made him quite popular right at the beginning of his administration. And back to the primary, the Democrats say, the answer you'll hear from the Democrats as to why they're not having a primary is because it might actually hurt Joe to have a primary. And at first, I was skeptical about this because it is a close contest between Democrats, the voters of which will most likely vote for the Democrat no matter who they are. They are just voicing their desire for a specific candidate with a specific platform to represent them. A lot of commentators have also said this. This is not like a unique viewpoint. Why is a primary such a problem? Nevertheless, the Democrats' actions reflect an earnest desire to keep the primary a closed conversation, a private conversation, more or less excluding the existence of challengers. Many outlets will report that Joe Biden is running unchallenged for some reason. Good on PBS. Good on PBS for actually reporting that Joe Biden does have a couple of primary challengers with Marianne Williamson and Dean Phillips, but most outlets don't even acknowledge their existence. And what perplexes me the most is the complete media shunning of Marianne Williamson. So my question is just, why are the Democrats having a private conversation to decide their nominee? If you like the video, like it down below. Please subscribe if you want to see more content like this. I will be working on the part 2 of what makes you unaware of your economic being, the Ameribraining video. Hit notifications if you want to see that right when that comes out. And comment if something interests you from this video. Let's get started. A little background here. The Democratic primary is, of course, a contest between no-names and household names alike to decide who's going to take the nomination from the official Democratic Party into the general election. They typically give voters a feeling of agency and of choice. The more enthusiastic Democrat voters who do vote in primaries will, tend to voice their opinion in a way that reflects their policy interests. You see high primary turnout generally when there's a lot of enthusiasm and interest in a hotly contested primary. And debates and anything like it are not happening this year. The Democrats are completely sitting out of the usual process of deciding who their nominee is going to be. And they more or less chosen Joe Biden as the presumptive nominee ahead of time, not hosting any kind of media environment for a primary challenger to steal the spotlight, to get their message out, to have a policy conversation. The policy conversation is being basically completely shut out while we are more or less getting 4 more years of Joe Biden, prospectively, if he wins the general, more or less pressed upon us. Now, for over a year now, Marianne Williamson has been an announced, earnest presidential candidate running a serious campaign with, a policy platform that is social democratic in nature. She calls it Second New Deal or something like that. She uses kind of FDR rhetoric to tell people that she actually cares about their material well-being and wants to fix a lot of the material problems we have. After announcing, Marianne appeared on several outlets, both independent and mainstream, namely Fox News had her on. She was on a bunch of leftist podcasts. At this point, she's not really making that same media tour, and her campaign is running out of money. Whereas the campaign of Cenk Uygur has kind of been more of a visibility campaign for the unviability of Joe Biden as a Democratic nominee, for the possibility of different Democratic nominees. Marianne is running an earnest campaign, more or less. Like, it doesn't appear to me that she's doing this for any ulterior motive. Like, she's just dumping money into running like a presidential nominee would try to do normally. It's not some kind of pressure campaign. It's not a book tour, as far as I know. I've heard people say that. I'm pretty sure she's just earnestly running in the primary, just like she did in 2020. And even though she poses zero threat to Joe Biden in the Democratic primary, she has been either completely shunned in the media or misrepresented or straight up slandered in some cases in both print and other press outlets. From the misrepresentation of when she used to work with AIDS patients to her constantly being referred to as a new agey type crazy person, she has either been completely dismissed out of hand or unacknowledged. Or the third option is slandered, ridiculed by not just the media, but sometimes the Democratic leadership itself.
I know you're probably going to say Hatch Act is restricting you in this, but is the president annoyed, frustrated with Marianne Williamson for jumping in the race ahead of him? Did he want a clear field to run against the Republican nominee in 2024?
Just not tracking that. I mean, if I had a what is it called, a little globe here, crystal ball, then I can tell you. But I imagine 8-ball, whatever. If I can feel her aura, I just don't have anything. I just don't have anything to share on that. Gosh, you guys are making me laugh now.
And I'd just like to illustrate why I think all this negative coverage or lack of coverage is taking place for a candidate with, again, 0 odds of winning the Democratic nomination. Like, she does not stand a chance. Like, she does not have the name recognition to stand a chance. I'll explain why I think there is such a resistance to Marianne even getting her message out on the national stage. And again, it's not this. I don't want to say that everything that's happening around the Democratic primary is solely directed at this one candidate with like low to no chance of winning the nomination. It's not. The Democrats have, I think, some kind of hidden motive for why they want to keep Joe Biden sequestered from the rest of a contested, hotly debated primary. But at least as far as I can tell, there might be a couple key benefits to completely excluding Marianne from the conversation. And to illustrate what I mean by this, how the Democrats benefit from having this private conversation around their primary, I want to take us back in time to 2020 when Bernie was running. If we look at coverage of Bernie in 2020, it was all very negative. He was covered more negatively than any other candidate in the Democratic primary. Marianne was also running in the 2020 Democratic primary, but she just did not get enough negative attention, which I think the difference is she was not running this giant groundswell campaign with a lot of money and a lot of attention and a very real chance at winning the nomination. There were debates at the time. Candidates got a chance to voice their policy positions. Thoughts were flying back and forth. There were plenty of personal attacks, but also a substantive policy conversation, which at the time I think, pressured Joe Biden to make some promises that he could not keep eventually as a president. A good example of this is his promise to create a public option for healthcare in the United States, something that he never did. I think just when you're running next to the universal healthcare candidate who's making a convincing economic and humane case for Medicare for all, you have to concede something. And the moderate concession that his campaign chose was the public option policy, with the caveat of never actually creating a public option. And throughout that campaign, Bernie was besmirched by smears, slander, all kinds of negative coverage. Certain pundits were threatened to be fired, basically, over their comments about Bernie, which were just very slanted and ultimately kind of biased against him. And this was all happening completely out in the open. It was no secret. The positive coverage that went to other Democratic nominee candidates, other Democratic primary candidates, was not received by Bernie. He only got vitriol from the overall Democratic establishment. Another example of this was in 2016, where you have kind of like the Hillary's email DNC Podesta leaks, which were basically leaked out and showed that Hillary was given debate questions ahead of time. The DNC wanted to put a fork in Bernie and ultimately kind of colluded to squish him out of the primary, make sure he absolutely did not become the Democratic nominee. At the time, in 2016 and in 2020, he was running on a New Deal-like platform, much like Marianne Williamson is now. The messaging is a little bit different around the edges, but they're both running on just an economic popular message that is more or less supposed to offer relief to Americans who are on hard times in multiple ways. Fortunately, Joe Biden got the general election. Like he won that. We didn't get Donald Trump as a result of that. But again, we have Joe Biden in 2024, and the situation is way more dire than it was then. Like, we're coming out of a Democratic incumbency with a very low approval rated Democrat who is going to run a second term that he said he never would. Things are just not looking good for him. And rather than having a primary and kind of contesting this nomination, the Democrats are choosing to keep it shut out. And I've heard this a couple times from other pundits, and I just want to repeat it here because I think it is so on point. The Democrat establishment, the DNC, the kind of, elite donor representing Democrats, or corpocrats as I call them, they despise the working class members of their base. They hate them. Like, they do not want them to get anything. They don't want any rhetoric to reach them. They want to get them on cultural and social issues, get their vote that way, not earn their vote with anything material. And when a candidate is speaking to those earnest material needs, they shut that down so fast. They avoid anything economic and material like the plague, opting for, infrastructure bills at best, like CHIPS and the IRA that happened while Biden was in office. During Biden's tenure, the child tax credit has been reduced back to pre-pandemic levels. That hurt a lot of people. A lot of children went into poverty because of that, because the expanded tax credit pulled a lot of children out of poverty. They don't want you to think about this. Biden's campaign is completely based on the vibes of making sure Donald Trump does not win. And what that does is it takes all material air out of the conversation. It makes him really vulnerable to a candidate that can actually attack those issues, like Bernie, or in this case, like Marianne. So here is where I want to kind of make a critical point, that I think the comments that the Democrats made that a primary might hurt Joe might actually have some kind of merit when he is so low approval, has no desire to materially improve the lives of Americans, and could easily be pushed into a political corner by somebody with another popular groundswell based on a New Deal platform. Bringing it back to Marianne in 2024, why is she never covered by the media? Well, possibly for the same reason that Bernie was represented so negatively in 2020. It's more or less so that we don't have to have a conversation about material issues. It will make our immaterial vibes-based candidate look bad. If there were debates happening tomorrow, Marianne would be up on that stage promising 10 million new public housing units in 10 years, promising a rent ceiling, an actual rent ceiling in America that would control the prices of all rents. In combination with public housing, this would basically take housing out of its affordability crisis, which we're experiencing right now. She's a Medicare for All candidate. She ultimately is running on a humane platform. I do not think that she would be giving Israel money to do what it's doing in Gaza, like we have been doing. And none of these progressive policy prescriptions are compatible with Joe Biden's overall platform, the platform of the Democratic Party. I'm talking your platforms of people like Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, any kind of future Democrats. Gavin Newsom, too, is a good example of this. He shut down Medicare for All in California, a couple years ago? He vetoed it, even though it passed our legislature. Joe Biden has already started his fundraising ads, the one where he's standing next to Obama and they're saying we got to beat Trump in 2024. His core message is just that we have to beat Trump. That's what he's running on. Again, there's nothing material there. It's all vibes-based. It's just, a lot of it revolves around, I don't want him to take your freedoms away. Like, I'm kind of like the freedom candidate, and he's going to take away some more of your civil liberties in the same way that he appointed judges that struck down Roe v. Wade. And there is a point to that, and I don't want Trump to win. Mind you, I will be voting, even though I'm in California and it's going to swing blue no matter what. I will be voting come November for Joe Biden because he's the only option I have compared to Donald Trump. But that's not really where the politics should be happening. It should be happening in the primary. That's where a dynamic conversation should be taking place on how we improve materially the lives of Americans. Because I guarantee you that conversation doesn't happen in the Republican primary. We just watch them shoot back and forth with their various conspiracy theories and their xenophobias and all the stuff that the Republicans have become. Trying to kind of compete for who can one-up each other and be more fash than the other guy, and sometimes who can be the most sycophantic to Big Daddy Trump. All of that, is, again, completely immaterial. And rather than being the party with material interests of Americans in mind, the Democrats have opted to just shove Joe Biden down the rails and hope it sticks. It really is like a fingers crossed campaign, in my opinion. And I'm sure a lot of other Democrats would like to have other options, I don't want to just have Joe Biden versus Donald Trump again. That's why enthusiasm and approval and all these other metrics are really low. This is one of the least enthusiastic elections that we've ever seen in this country, because we're just seeing the same two old men go at it that we had 4 years ago. It's boring. Neither of them is offering anything to anyone. It's just Trump has his cultists and Joe Biden has his, never Trumpers. And that's it. That's kind of we're in such an abstract state of politics now that is so far removed for anything that real people care about. How are you going to pay the rent? How much do you get paid? Can you go to the doctor? Can you afford to eat? How much is gas? All of these things are super important, and they are basically being ignored by the party that once upon a time was the economic populist option. And yeah, just to cap that off, it's just way easier for the Democrats to have a candidate who offers nothing economically, nothing materially, and says, well, I need you to help me beat Trump, donate, vote for me. You're not going to get anything out of it. You're just going to get the negative reward of not getting Trump. That's what we're in this together for, is to make sure he doesn't win. While he is unconditionally supportive of what's going on in Gaza, while he is capitulating to the right-wing narrative on the border crisis, which is complex and is not what it's made out to be in the media, while he refuses to redo things like the child tax credit or forgive student debt, he's going to remain unpopular because he's not doing anything to fix it in a way that his voters would respond to. It's it would be a catastrophe for him, most likely, if he had to go up against somebody with a New Deal policy platform. Like, he would have to shift his whole rhetoric around that, because, like, no way would he be on that debate stage and just saying, like, I'm the one who can beat Trump. Me, 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 me. Oh, forget about all this other stuff. I'm the one who can beat Trump. Forget about this crazy over here. Because if they were having an earnest debate with these social democratic candidates in play, like Bernie in 2020, you would hear about universal health care. You would hear about higher wages. You would hear about the, carving out of the Rust Belt area in the States. And with his polls the way they are, he cannot come back from any further drops. The Democrats are not taking any chances. And so I wonder, I'm not saying this is how it is, but I wonder if there might be some truth to their concerns that a primary might actually hurt Joe Biden. It might actually take away more of his enthusiasm, ruin his approval even more, because he would look so piddly compared to some social democrats. So again, the DNC is not holding a visible, hotly contested primary. It's not some big debated show and spectacle where we synthesize ideas and come with, a new policy outlook. Nothing of the kind. The policies are not in the conversation. The conversation does not involve us, the voters. It is a private conversation. And something I found interesting, too, while researching this, was Nikki Haley was actually polling at the same rate as Marianne Williamson in November. And she was getting way more coverage and taken way more seriously by all kinds of media outlets than Marianne Williamson. And I got to ask, why? Why is she so legitimate? Is it like her union-busting history in her own state where she's the governor? What makes her so legitimate? Let's not ignore the fact, too, that Joe Biden is down in key swing states. You can look at several studies. I'll link a couple in the description where he is down in polls in like most of the swing states. In the one that he's up, it's up by like 2 points. So he's an extremely vulnerable candidate who would actually do well to kind of shore up his support with various different voter bases, with some economic promises and sometimes policy. He is the president, after all. And, of course, getting us divested from Israel's war in Gaza, which is killing Palestinians in the tens of thousands. But for some reason, the Biden campaign is committed to keeping it immaterial, to keeping their issues completely vibes-based. Much to my chagrin, they won't really come out and mention that there's anything wrong with the economy right now. On the contrary, Joe Biden is taking credit for a high stock market and low unemployment. These are your typical kind of superficial markers of a strong economy, but everybody knows there is an affordability crisis happening in multiple sectors of our standard of living, especially in housing. Housing has become extremely unaffordable, especially in states like California, where he is, the de facto winner, but he won't get any kind of progressive enthusiasm because of his current campaign. Yeah, it's just really frustrating that the media and the DNC, all of the parties that usually get together, all of the groups that usually get together to have debates, like the Democratic primary debate, are not having it this time around. And because of that, Democrats don't really get to know their options. They don't get to know that they have options. Like I said before, certain outlets are reporting that Biden is running unchallenged in the Democratic primary. That is not true. That is simply not true. He has Democratic primary challengers. They're out there. You can look them up. You can learn about them and their policies. They just are kind of trying to look the other way and ignore them completely, hope they go away, and it's working. Like, that's absolutely been successful, which makes me think it's kind of strange, too, that he is now coming out, like most recently this week, he's coming out saying that he's going to be attacking some of the, like the Green Party candidate Jill Stein and the independent Cornel West. He's going to be attacking them from the left, is what their campaign is saying they're going to do. Let's see how that turns out. I find that to be really ridiculous when he is completely ignored, like an actual Democrat running against him entirely. And now we'll pay attention to West, who is going to get none of the vote, and Jill Stein, who's going to get like maybe 2 or 3% tops. Yeah, they just don't want you to know your options in the Democratic primary. In the words of Margaret Thatcher, there is no alternative. you are going to be voting for Joe Biden unless you want to vote for Donald Trump. So enjoy that come November. Yeah, so that about wraps it up for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Leave a like down below if you liked the video. Subscribe if you want to see more like this, and leave a comment if anything came up. I will see you guys in a week. Bye.